begin with a note from Langston Hughes, since at this time of the year there is so much talk about the dream and the dream. Langston Hughes gives us this as it was made popular through Lorraine Hansberry, buried in A Raisin in the Sun. And it begins, what happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load, or does it explode? Brothers and sisters, in a laboratory, no experiment is a failure. Even if the results of that experiment only proves that it can't be done that way, that experiment is not a failure. The experiment of the life and legacy of the man that we know to be Martin Luther King Jr., the experiment of that life was not a failure. It was not a failure. It serves us well today. Because even if it does nothing else, it tells us that it can't work that way. And when you find out in an experiment that it can't work that way, then the results advances your study, advances your research, and it should put you on firm footing toward real resolution and the best results that you might hope for. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., here 30 years ago, and as he walked in Selma, Alabama, and worked in Selma, Alabama, and Birmingham, Alabama, and Montgomery, Alabama, and Chicago, and throughout the hells of North America, as the chairman or as the leader of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, as Dr. King worked 30 years ago for us, it is written in the scriptures, what greater love could a man have, or a woman, than to lay down their life for their brother, for their sister, for their friend? Dr. King laid down his life for us. And if for no other reason, we must honor him for laying down his life for us, but we must analyze his life. And we, as the most honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us, that it is after one has made the transition, after they have made the transition to what some call death, but what others call to the realm of the ancestors or the Egungun, then a period can be placed behind the testament of that life. And then we can carefully and critically make an analysis of that life. Dr. King laid down his life for us, and Dr. King believed in the moral conscience of the white man. And since we're talking about civil rights and human rights here tonight, I think it's fitting that we begin right there. He believed in the moral conscience of the white man. Well, I'm here tonight at D&J to tell you that the white man ain't got no morals and he ain't got no conscience. Dr. King believed in civil rights. Malcolm believed in human rights. I'm here to tell you that the white man ain't too human and he ain't too right. It makes no difference whether it's civil rights or human rights. You must weigh the circumstances surrounding the very origin of the white man into the world. This we must put on the scale of Ma'at and give it the Ma'atic weigh-in and see if it strikes the Ma'atic balance. And if it does not strike the Ma'atic balance, then we must make sure that we are not victims of history, because it is written that he or she who does not learn the lessons of history is doomed to repeat. Presidential White House Commission set up by Lyndon Baines Johnson, a gun-slinging outlaw from Texas. Lyndon Baines Johnson set up the Kerner Commission. And the Kerner Commission determined that America 30 years ago was two Americas, one black and one white, separate and unequal, and that the number one problem in America 30 years ago was white racism. 30 years later, after Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the Kerner Commission has reconvened and determined that America is still two Americas, one black and one white, separate still, unequal still, and that the number one problem in America today is still white racism. 30 years after Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., they questioned Jet Magazine staff and journalists questioned the widow of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. They questioned Sister Coretta Scott King. They questioned his daughter. They questioned his son. They questioned the Reverend Wyatt T. Walker. They questioned former City Councilman Hosea Williams, who was one of his right-hand men. They questioned Andy Young, former mayor of Atlanta, Georgia, and former ambassador to the United Nations. They questioned them, and they questioned others, and they put the question to them about success or failure. They put the question to them, have we really made progress 30 years after Dr. King? They wanted them to analyze the dream of Dr. King. And they all said that they could see some change here and there. But they all said, they all agreed that America had a long, long way to go. Some of them were even specific. 30 years after Dr. King, if we're going to deal with civil rights and human rights, and we're going to weigh it properly, we must understand that affirmative action, which was important to Dr. King, but never has been important to me, because the action has never been affirmative. We don't need affirmative action. We need reparations and freedom and independence, liberation and salvation. But affirmative action was important to Dr. King. 30 years after Dr. King, affirmative action does not even remain a dream anymore. It's a nightmare now. A recalcitrant cold wind blowing through Congress, blowing through the Senate, blowing through the White House, whistling throughout the hells of North America, has now swept affirmative action almost but from the scene today. 30 years after the dream of the dreamer, Section 8 entitlements, quota systems that were supposed to level the playing field after people had been robbed of their names, their language, their religion, their culture, their God, their folkways, their mores, their norms, robbed of the very power of our own being. All of that is being erased today. Such measures that were supposed to be set up to level the playing field. Now you've got devils, you've got so-called Jews, imposter Jews coming up with theories and theorems on a bell curve. You break both of my legs, and then you call a race. Break both of my legs, and you stand, somebody working with you, stands at the starter's line, fires the starter's pistol, and you're the only one running. You break the tape, and then you turn around and criticize me because I haven't made it to the finish line yet. I'm dragging along because you've broken both of my damn legs. How could you expect me to finish? The white man breaks our legs and then has a race and then says, well, you really are intellectually inferior to me. You robbed me of my name, my language, my religion, my culture, my God, my folkways, my mores, my norms, and then you turn around and give me a goddamn test? How could you expect me to score like you?
Imagine a nation with no Africans hating the blackest of faces, where nobody that's black is a racist. Imagine history on a factual basis. Truthfully, how they had us in cages. Picture Allah with us back in his graces. Picture black-owned factories making stacks instead of cats cooking crack in a basement. Imagine you never had to be facing a crooked Jake holding a gat to your faces with your back to the pavement. Picture never knowing how nasty it tastes to catch you a case and get the max cause they had a rap with a statement. Now imagine a nation that never had to battle inflation. A black government that's actually gracious, and black kids learning at faster paces, educated by teachers who have the patience to make sure they see your graduation. Now imagine a nation after students master the basics of science, they learn how to apply it. Picture living with no pork in your diet, cholesterol levels are down. Picture living with no devils around, the cost rock the whole world.